All right, this is going to be part 29, and I'm going to go back to Kubrick again into a category that I don't fully have decoded, but I have enough here where it's compelling. Let's begin with the pyramids. We have the prisoners walking in a circle with the pyramid over them here. It even has a capstone if you look carefully. So this represents the flat Earth. Here is the population where prisoners were walking in a circle. We're told it's a globe, but it really isn't, and we have a dome over us. So this is shown to us again through the Van Gogh book that Nicole was wrapping for Tom Cruise. This is the original painting that this obviously was copied from, and Van Gogh does a copy of this as well. And they're all the same thing. They represent humanity walking in a circle. They're supervised in a prison. And we have the pyramid here. Here we don't have any pyramid. Here we have the pyramid. And we have Barry Lyndon. You know, there, there's a pyramid right there. I don't know if you can see it. It's not really well hidden, to be honest with you. And, you know, so here's an army, and they're under the pyramid. And he's a boxer. We have the Torrance's apartment. The Timberline Lodge has a pyramidal roof structure, which Kubrick completely omits in his exterior of the Overlook. He does everything exactly like the original hotel, but he omits the pyramid. Yet we see the pyramidal roof structure in the Torrance's apartment repeatedly. We see this roof. They're living in the pyramid, you know, in the Overlook, but there is no pyramid at the Overlook. So it's what's missing. We're always looking for what's missing. So we're shown they live in a pyramid, but yet it doesn't appear on the outside of the hotel. So once again, we have a missing pyramid. You know, Danny comes out of the window and he slides down the pyramidal snow drift here. This is exactly where the pyramid should be. You know, we see that in their roof beams inside their apartment. We see the pyramidal structure. But here we see none. It's been omitted. He just puts this little smokestack thing here. Here's another Barry Lyndon picture where we have another pyramid in the background. So we have pyramid. We also have the pyramid from 2001, A Space Odyssey, the Dawn of Man sequence. If you look in the background, there's actually a pyramid. And when I researched it, I found out that some of the photographs were taken in Egypt. So, you know, is it an Egyptian pyramid in the background? I would bet money it is. We also see a pyramid in Dr. Strangelove when they're flying to the North Pole. They, in the distance, you can see a pyramid. And once again, it's subjective, but it's a perfect pyramidal structure in the North Pole. So, you know, he probably added it, but either way, there's another pyramid in that movie. Then we have the really weird thing of John Malkovich, and this is a Diane Arbus picture. So Diane Arbus is the woman that dies. She slits her wrists in the bathtub on the day Apollo 15 launches on Stanley's 42nd birthday. So she takes this picture of Mick Jagger, who was born the same day as Kubrick. And he's a chess piece because he was knighted. He's Sir Mick Jagger. So we have Mick Jagger in this furry collar thing. We have John Malkovich, you know, calling me Kubrick, Mr. He knows this language. So he's, you know, he's doing a twin mirroring thing here. So let's move that out of the way. And of course, we have Admiral Byrd, which now, of course, they can't find the picture, probably. We have Admiral Byrd wears the same kind of jacket, and he wears this on his... I'm going to have to come back to this because I can't find the picture. Let me move this to the side. Don't forget that. I'll come back to it. Here we have Shatner's, you know, the Star Trek captain, and this is a Citroen one-off, one of one, with a bubble top on it. So Citroen means lemon, so he's got a lemon with a bubble top on it. It's another bubble top car, one-off car clue. Here's another Collins axe in the thing, in the dog. So Keith David uses the Collins axe. Wilfred Brimley uses the Collins axe. And, you know, so once again, we have the Collins fire axe thread. Here's the Collins Axe with Brimley. Here's a picture from Full Metal Jacket. And this is not a standard issue helmet. This helmet has been modified to have a cone head shape to it. No one had a helmet like this in Vietnam. And we get to see this shot of this helmet for a split second. He turns his head and then he turns it back. And if you didn't notice it, you didn't notice it. But he has a cone head helmet on, so that's very odd. Let's see here. All right, let's jump right in. Now, here we go. Here's the picture I was looking for before. So here we have Admiral Byrd on the cover of his book, Alone. And then we have these two guys. Here's another thing I didn't mention in previous videos I just discovered. Pyle changes toilets. He blows his head off on this toilet. The scene cuts for a split second, and then now he's moved down to a different toilet. So there's two, I guess this is another doors of perception thing. I guess you could say there's two different toilet seat doors, but I'm not sure what the interpretation is this. But it's the missing, we're always looking for what's changed or what's missing. So he was sitting on this toilet, now he's on that one. We have the rifle Coriolis, we have the toilet Coriolis. We're being brought attention to this toilet here. Let's close that. So let's jump from pyramids to the Egyptians. Now, National Geographic did an interesting program on Nefertiti. And I watched the program, and you realize after you watch the program that they completely omit the fact that Nefertiti had a massive cone head. And they seem to omit this fact that a lot of these Egyptian emperors wore huge headdresses, quite likely to conceal their massive cone heads. So during the National Geographic episode they do on Nefertiti, they make a mock-up of her head, and they give her a little bit bigger skull than normal, but it's nowhere near the size of it. And it becomes ridiculous when you see all the different. This is Nefertiti's sister, I believe. This was made during she was alive when this statue was made. So I would think the statues that were made when she was alive are much more accurate than National Geographic's statue. And here's Nefertiti again with her massive cone head. Here's a Baracus skull found in Baracus, Peru, superimposed over Nefertiti's headdress. This would completely conceal her cone head. Here's another Baracus skull. A lot of these skulls have the hair is still preserved to them, and it's red, which is really bizarre. Here's Imhotep, I think is his name. He has a cone head. Here's another cone head Baracus skull. We also see these skulls in Malta. Big cone head skulls. You know, once again, we have a headdress on here that could conceivably hide a cone head. There's also anatomical differences between conehead skulls and human skulls. If you notice here, there's one suture that runs left to right across the head. In a human skull, there are three sutures. One runs down the back of the skull, and this one runs around. And also, the skull is much smaller. It doesn't have this double hump structure here. The eye sockets are smaller. The jaw is smaller. The teeth are smaller on a human skull. All I can say is it's like the archaeological find of the century that there isn't an archaeologist in the world that will touch this for some reason. Like the Baracus skulls were found in 1925, and it didn't even really become public knowledge until the 2000s. So who was sitting on this find, and why do they continue not to test these things? The only DNA test that's ever been done on these skulls was done with private money from a man named Brian Forrester. and he found out they're not human. This is not a human skull. Then we have pictures of royalty, and we see these strange headdresses on the royalty. There's another Conehead. We have, once again, we have a headdress on this skull. Let's see what else we got here. I mean, this is not there's no cradle boarding in the world. If you take a normal sized human skull and you cradle board it, yes, it will become longer, but it doesn't have the volume of this thing. Look at the size. If you saw this person walking down the street, you would immediately notice, like, wow, look at the freaking Conehead on that freak. And, look at the size of these teeth and the eye socket. And the jawbone is huge. This is a carnivore. It's a predator. This goes back to the weaving. We're always weaving the wicker basket and the wicker chair. And here we have Augustus Picard and his co-pilot, the first man to go to 51,000 feet in a balloon. And they were forced to wear basket helmets on their heads right before they left. Some political entity decided that it was too risky for them to go up in this balloon thing without helmets on. So they put baskets on their heads. So it's just another little weaving basket thing that we find. And I'll come back to this guy later. Not in this video, but in another one. And this is interesting. In this picture we have the big shower head and the little head. The big head and the little head. In Kubrick's puzzle, we're using the little head, because we have like the Dick, Peter, mine shaft, Adam's probe humor, where we're, all these different words for the word dick. So we're using our little head. But then once we find the Dick, we find Dick Nixon and Philip K. Dick, and we find all these Dicks and Richard Strauss, and we're using the one-eyed monster to find the Dick. But then once we find it, we use our big head to actually find where the historical allegory and how it fits in the puzzle. So, we have two shower heads here, the big head and the little head. These people were clearly Coneheads. How people do not see this now, I don't know. We have coins made, and this guy has a very suspicious looking head. I mean, Jack Elam is in the All Things Jack. Jack Elam has one eye. He's a one-eyed Jack. He always plays a drunk. So in Kubrick's Apollo missions, he has to include a drunk. So, he includes Buzzy Aldrin. And here's the coat again. This is the whole John Malkovich, Admiral Byrd coat thing going on here. It's pretty obvious when you know what you're looking at here. And so the movie Halloween is released on October 25th, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Queen of Screams. And it's on October 25th, it turns out that's Admiral Byrd's birthday. Here's another statue. Look at the size of the melon on it. This is not a human. It's a variant. It's a sister race from us, but it's not human. That's not a human skull. I'm sorry. You don't have to DNA test anything that's not human. Here's a science fiction magazine, Satellite Science Fiction. And it has an article by Arthur C. Clarke, the father of the satellite, and Philip K. Dick as well. Not human. Here's the Collins axe in John Carpenter's Vampires. It's seen in that movie several times. If you saw this guy walking down the street, would you assume immediately that it was a product of cradle boarding? I think you would have to be high on some kind of drugs if you assume that. This is clearly not a human skull. This is a race that existed on this planet as early as, I believe, one of the skulls was carbon dated at 700 years. So 700 years ago, the guys like this were running around in Paracas, Peru. And we're told they all died off and they just drifted off to the annals of history, and then we're to forget about them. And that any traces we find in the pyramids or anywhere like that, we're to forget about. Now, in 2001: A Space Odyssey, they talk about the Tycho magnetic anomaly. And as they're talking about it, Dr. Floyd says, he's told that, yes, we found out, strangely enough, the monolith was deliberately buried. In other words, someone buried it, covered it up with dirt intentionally, deliberately. Well, we see the same exact thing with the pyramids. We have the Chinese are burying their pyramids. We have buried pyramids in Bosnia. We have buried pyramids hidden in Barry Lyndon. We have, so why are people burying pyramids? Why would somebody spend that much effort to bury the pyramids? Someone is working very hard to cover up their tracks. Now, if you notice on this skull, you can see the really big bump right in the front of it. I don't know any humans with a bump like that. And this one has one exact. Another thing you'll notice too is the smaller children, their heads aren't quite as big. So it almost looks like this race, as they age, their brains get bigger and their heads get bigger as they age. Almost like how your nose gets bigger as in a human. They're not, the structure and the bone structure of these skulls does not match a human whatsoever. Here we clearly see the suture runs directly across the skull. There is no suture running down this way. So it's not a human skull. And B, it's way too large to be a human skull. Could there be people that walk among us that are part of this race and we wouldn't even detect them? I don't know, but you wonder. You really do. There's Admiral Byrd again. Alone. Alone is A11. If, ALONE can also be A11, just like Apollo 11. It's a monolithic message. I'm not ready for that one yet. So then we have Raoul Amundsen, same thing, same kind of fur jacket. That goes with there. Okay. Here you have They Live. We have Edgar Casey on ESP, Two of a Kind, a book about the Hillside Strangler, where they think they were but they actually think there was a whole crew of a satanic cult operating in these murders. And then below that we have the Bermuda Triangle. Now over here we have golf, which is in our clue set, and there's also tennis is over here. And this is Golf, Let TV Teach You. So we need to pay attention to what books we're seeing in these movies as well. They're very interesting what they show us. Here's the first production car to ever successfully drive in Antarctica. It was named the Red Terror after a ship. So we have the Red Beetle in The Shining. Why is it red? Because this is the first production car that ever worked in Antarctica. They did send specialty production vehicles there, but none of them worked very well. This was the first car they had in Antarctica, a production car in Antarctica that worked well in that environment. We have Apollo and his golden rays. Tang, the drink we brought to the moon. That's not a human skull. I'm sorry. I don't know what it is. And some of these skulls even show signs of having had brain surgery done to them. Here's Fall and Paul. They're not the same person. They're two different people. 2 becomes 1, 21. Here's how the capsules were actually launched. This is what you saw in Hawaii. Of course, it was done well away from prying eyes, so they did it in Hawaii, and they kicked it out of a cargo plane. And that was your saucer splashdown. Richard Byrd, October 25th. This is the release date of Halloween, the birth date of the movie Halloween, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, her first movie, Queen of Screams. Here's All Things That Swing, Swing Under the Knots. This is Kubrick's unmade movie he never made. So you have the golf club swings, and the tennis racket swings, and the ping pong paddle swings, and the baseball bat swings, and the Apollo astronauts swung on their cables. And The Foucault's pendulum swings. It's a whole category. I've made a list of these. Here we have Kubrick's Gary Lockwood, the first Star Trek ever. And then we have the first Star Trek ever filmed, which is The Cage, which is renamed. The censors don't like this. They said people may start thinking. So you really wonder what people might start thinking about that worried them about this episode. And here's Kubrick playing tennis, another tennis clue. Here's Batman and a three-dimensional chessboard again. This theme runs through all these movies that are connected together. The Batman series of movies is alchemical. That's not a human skull. I'm sorry. Kubrick threw you a bone. He's in Austin Powers. He's like, throw me a bone, people. I've been frozen for 30 years. Well, this message, this puzzle has been frozen for 30 years, and it's time to thaw it out. So Kubrick threw us a bone. And he knew eventually somebody would figure this out. So he gives you the bone, ICBM. The weapon has changed, but we still don't get it. Beating the dead horse. These are funny when you see the collages where you have the lem is over here, but no, it's over here at the same time. How can that happen? It's a joke. I'm not going to go into depth in this video, but this is George Bush, and this is his plane, the Barbara 3. He loved naming things Barbara. It was the Barbara 1, the Barbara 2, the Barbara 3. His ship that he sails back between the island for the Bay of Pigs operation was named the Barbara. Turns out Barbara Bush was born in Corona, Flushing, Queens. Grizzly bear, that's not really anything. We have the Coneheads. Clearly, the Coneheads existed. Clearly, these skulls are not human, and they have actually been DNA tested now and proven not to be human, and yet no one ever talks about them. The pyramids are buried deliberately, just like the monolith is deliberately buried on the moon. This I wanted to bring up real quickly. Ken Kesey was an MK Ultra patient. He got dosed with LSD, and they did all kind of mind control things. He volunteered for it. And he later on, he gets a bus, and he paints the bus all up, and it's called Further, and he goes on his acid trip bus thing. He's the guy that writes the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So we don't have to really be conspiracy theorists to go out on a limb here that Ken Kesey is telling us that, sometimes in these mental facilities, really questionable things happen. And I find it interesting as Penguin Books as well. So he rides the big the LSD bus Further. I'll get a picture of that. So we're being pointed to another race that lives on the planet with us. We're being pointed to this several different ways. He includes Malcolm McDowell. Malcolm McDowell stars in Time After Time. He plays H.G. Wells. In H.G. Wells' book, the human race diverges between the ruling class and the worker class, and it splits into two distinct races, and you have the Eloi and the Morlock. And so this is kind of what we're being pointed to. Here would be, the ruling race, and we have the humans. In this episode, they want to make the human race slaves for them because they don't like the work. Everything happens in their minds. They want to monitor the workers. They don't really want to do the work. So, we get the Conehead helmet. In Full Metal Jacket, this is absolutely bizarre. We have the cone helmets in 2001: A Space Odyssey. The girls on the space station, they wear ball hats on them. And we have the Trans-Antarctic Expedition. And we have Wendy Carlos. Wendy Carlos was originally Walter Carlos. I'm sorry, Wendy Elkind was originally Walter Carlos. This is Kubrick's composer for a lot of the music in his movies. So Walter Carlos became Wendy Carlos. He became a transgender. So we have a little thread of trans. So we have trans Antarctic, transsexual, and I'm going to make a list of these, and it's growing. So we're pointed to pyramids and the Coneheads that are supposedly extinct, and the forbidden Antarctica land we can't go to, and buried pyramids. And that's 29 right there.